For more, we can speak to Sébastien Maillard, a special advisor at the Jacques Delors Institute. Hello to you, and thank you for speaking to Paris Direct. First of all, how significant was it to hear the statement from Burkhard?
It is significant, but it's actually not a surprise if you remember what President Macron himself had said on French public television on the 5th of March. He had said himself, it was all about the Russian threat and how great it was and how the French had to prepare for it. And I think the remarks of the Thierry Burkhard come also ahead of Macron's awaited speech Sunday evening at the Ministry of Defense, since we know there's going to be an increase in defense spending in France, the need to justify and to prepare the public opinion on the need for it by revealing such this. France actually, Macron himself knows very well how what this threat is about. In his first electoral campaign in 2017, if we remember correctly, he had already been targeted by Russian disinformation and all this hybrid war, so cyber attacks, the way to try to manipulate public opinion. So it doesn't mean that Russia means to attack France militarily, of course not, but it tried to destabilize French society as much as it can, supporting extreme parties, and so there is this attempt that is, and it's the fact that the General Burkhard said it openly. It's a way to tell to Russia, we know, we see, we know what you are doing, and we mention it openly as so that everybody knows.
All right, so not a surprise, but it is significant, and also laying the groundwork ahead of Macron's speech, as you say there. I'm just curious, so is France really apart from the rest of Europe in terms of criticizing Moscow?
France has taken the leadership together with the UK, and I'm sure the UK could also be evenly targeted the same way. That those two countries are now the leaders of the coalition, the so-called coalition of the willing, which is meant to protect Ukraine in case of a ceasefire or when a ceasefire happens. So those two countries are really perhaps also the ones who have the biggest armies, the ones who are. France has always been in the EU, also leading the way together with Poland and the Baltic states to try to on the sanctions, and there will be another round of sanctions to be decided next week by the 27 ministers of foreign affairs. So yes, it's clearly a big player, and Macron has now clearly repeated his staunch support to Ukraine. So that's why it has been identified by Russia, also because it's ideological. You cannot be more opposite to the Kremlin's regime. So that's why I think it's not a surprise that it has been targeted as such. Germany is, of course, also concerned, but it hasn't gone as far as France in terms of speaking out when especially under the previous chancellor, but even now Chancellor Merz has ruled out of sending some specific missiles to Ukraine. So, but the tourist ones. So it is France that, yes, it is perhaps the first and foremost country that can be easily identified by Russia as a proponent of against its regime.
And so what do you think France should be bracing for? France is Russia's biggest enemy in Europe. What sort of threats or possible cyber attacks do you think French authorities are preparing for?
Well, we already witnessed, for instance, when there are, it was even said during the Yellow Vest movements or in other moments where every time there's a possibility to fuel polarized debate in France, especially in terms of disinformation or spreading fake news, I think that's really an area where it's closely monitored, and it's very difficult to prevent it. But there's in terms also of supporting the parties that are clearly against the EU. So yes, anything that can polarize, destabilize the society and try to bring more difficulties in the way Macron can succeed in his mandate. I think that will be used by the Russians. But we also saw it not only in France, but in other elections in Romania. We will see it coming in Moldova in September. But there are local elections coming in France, and yes, it will be, I think, a moment to watch for how the Russians try or not to destabilize such moments, especially also in 2027.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, you had the Trump administration, and we've seen officials from that government come to Europe during NATO meetings, openly criticize American allies and their government, and also sometimes, prop up far-right movements in those countries. So many people point to the U.S. as a destabilizing force as well. And if you have Russia on one side and the U.S. on the other, I guess the question is, in the middle, just how influential is Europe today?
Well, that's the question, I think, ahead of us. And that's, I think, the purpose of the Franco-British meeting that just took place yesterday in London. France and the United Kingdom know that they are the two main military, diplomatic powers on the continent that can safeguard partly safeguard its security, who see the transatlantic ties today being questioned, and so there's a need to team up. And all the public discourse of Macron about a Europe that is more sovereign and that is more independent, both from the U.S. and able to tackle the Russian threat, I think that's really what it's all about. And it takes, of course, not just France and the UK, but all the like-minded countries in Europe to be much more united. There are, of course, some countries where it's uneven. There's, of course, the case of Hungary, but there's also the case of Italy, which is more or less siding on different parts. But it's a really I would say a moment for truth for France and for the EU, either to be united and stand as a full-fledged power in its own right in the future, or just side with the Trump administration and just then not be able to have its say.
All right, Sébastien,
so
thank you.
It's a critical moment for that.
Sébastien, thank you so much for your time. Sébastien Maillard from the Jacques Delors Institute.